Thanks, Ross, and thanks for joining me tonight. Could the Victorian Royal Commission into construction corruption pose problems for Anthony Albanese's federal government too? Inflation eases, taking the pressure off interest rates, but the pressure of rising electricity prices is only getting worse. The karma chameleon, Boy George, shows the world how to stand up for Jews and for facts and stand up for humanity. Across to Esther Kraku in the UK. Also, Iran executes more young dissenters as war continues with the United States. Tom Switzer will join me on the desk. And in the Wednesday Wrangle with Justin and James, why is the divorce rate falling? Let's start the program with that very well-travelled Minister, Annika Wells. You know, the Minister for Rorts. I mean, the Minister for Sport, who got caught out taking her family to all sorts of sporting events at your expense and had to pay some of it back. Well, she's also Minister for Communications, responsible for the ABC. Well, when I say responsible for the ABC, I mean she seems to be the one washing her hands of the ABC, pretending there's nothing she could or should be doing after its disgraceful and offensive attack against mining magnate Gina Rinehart.
Look, as the Minister for Communications, like as the Minister for Sport, to be honest, if I spent all my time weighing in day to day on the scandals and outrages, valid or not, in both sport and communications, I wouldn't have time to do anything substantive.
I'll show you all of that extraordinarily pathetic exchange in just a moment. But first, I want you to imagine for a moment that I started this show off with a joke. You know, I don't mind a laugh. So imagine I just started the show by poking some fun at, I don't know, Jacinta Allen or Penny Wong or maybe someone outside politics. Let's make it the ABC presenter and staff-elected board member Laura Tingle. What if we don't give this person a name because it's too horrible? What if I just picked a prominent woman and said that they annoyed me and then joked that the way to fix that would be to shove a stick right up her butt and stir her around to mix up her guts and turn her into a sausage roll? Now, if I said that, I'd suggest a few things would happen. First, you'd be offended. Audience would think it was pretty sick, pretty violent and disgusting, and it's just a horrible thing to say. Second, they wouldn't laugh because there's just nothing funny about it. Where's the joke? And third, I'd most likely lose my job. News24 would say, sorry, mate, we pay you to share your opinions, but that stuff is beyond what is reasonably acceptable. We'd rather let you go. The station, of course, would then apologise to the woman involved very clearly and publicly. But at the ABC, they not only put hateful, unfunny filth to air, they leave it on their website so you can still see it. Not only was that filmed and edited and submitted to the ABC's Race Around the World program, but the ABC watched it and decided to put it to air. And then when it went to air, the others on the program saw no need to denounce it. Here's on-air judge Lee Sales. No, so funny, isn't it? Never mind that this was a violent slur against Rinehart that no decent person would put to air. The problem, apparently, was that it didn't sit well with the rest of the film. And then there was this from another judge, John Safran. Also cool and hilarious again. We pay all these public broadcasting types, and one thing that they share is a loathing for Gina Reinhardt, apparently, and a lack of good taste and decency, apparently, or a sense of humour. I seem to recall the left and the ABC railing against criticism of Julia Gillard, a victim of misogyny, they said. And they said the same recently about Jacinta Allen. They claim to be feminists, these public broadcasting types. They claim to stand up for all women and champion successful women. But it's a lie, of course. They only stand up for Green left women, for their chosen women. They care not for conservative women, for instance, or clearly successful business women. I mean, they don't even seem to care for Jewish women either, for that matter. But how about Annika Wells, the minister? This controversy has been going on for more than a week. The ABC has defended the clip, saying it was satirical. They've refused to apologise, and now their own internal ombudsman will take a look at it. No one has faced questioning over this until today, when our own Harry Clark turned up at a media conference Wells called on a sport matter, and her weakness is worth looking at in full.
Look, my personal view is it's unacceptable. Like any Australian, there's stuff I see on TV that I don't agree with. As the Minister for Communications, I respect the editorial independence of the ABC, but I understand they have now referred it to the Ombudsman. I think that was the right thing to do.
Should the ABC apologise?
The ABC should have referred it to the Ombudsman. That's what they've done.
But Gina Reinhardt's calling for an apology. Do you think it's something that they should be apologising for, while also referring it to the Ombudsman?
Look, as the Minister for Communications, like as the Minister for Sport, to be honest, if I spent all my time weighing in day to day on the scandals and outrages, valid or not, in both sport and communications, I wouldn't have time to do anything substantive. So, like I said, in this case, the ABC has referred to the Ombudsman. I think that was a helpful and righteous thing to do.
With regard to gendered and inflammatory language, is it not hypocritical for Labor figures to come out and condemn the Ditch the Witch campaign against Julia Gillard and Jacinta Allen, but not actively be condemning this sort of content towards Gina Reinhardt, the ABC?
I think the nuance here as the Minister for Communications is that I, as the Labor Minister for Communications, respect the editorial independence of the ABC. They have a board, they have a chair, they have a process for where these things reach public ire. I appreciate the fact they have now referred it to the Ombudsman for that to play out.
Thanks, guys. We'll get this photo.
All right.
And that's it. The media minder wraps it up. Well done, Harry Clark. This is extraordinary. Completely hands-off is Annika Wells. They just let the ABC use your money to pump out vile and violent filth, and as a government, they do nothing. I mean, the ABC chair was on this program just days ago, as you know, claiming the public broadcaster has zero political bias. Now we get the government doing nothing over this and saying nothing over this. It just goes to show that the ABC is out of control. There is no one in charge, and taxpayers are left to fund a mind-numbingly stupid and offensive and biased drivel day after day. And we wonder why in this country public debate is becoming a sewer. Let me show you an inspiring example of principle over fashion, of humanity over hatred. And it comes from what some might see as an unlikely source. You know him as Boy George, the androgynous British performer with the beautiful voice who came to fame fronting Culture Club in the 1980s. He experienced success and fame, and then he went through hard times with drugs and charges before re-emerging in recent years as a popular television judge on The Voice in Australia and the UK. Raised a Catholic as George O'Dowd in Britain, Boy George has long spoken up against anti-Semitism. Now he's committed his views to music, releasing a new song on social media, a song that is strong on facts and humanity and pushes back against the zeitgeist of lies against Israel. Have a listen. Yeah, there is no genocide. All the claims of genocide are demonstrably false. There is a war, a horrible war, one launched by Islamist extremists intent on killing all Jews and Israelis. Boy George's song references one of the sickening targets of the October the 7th atrocities, the slaughter at the Nova Music Festival, where young people danced for peace but were raped, slaughtered, defiled and taken hostage. Now, I can't play you the whole song, but I'll put it on my Instagram feed if you want to check out there later. Boy George's song calls out the anti-Israel and anti-Jewish protesters. They never mention October the 7th, he sings. Young girls raped against trees, murdered brutally for the crime of dancing. You condemn the Jews, he sings, with selective memory. Musicians holding flags, mouthing like sheep. Propaganda fueled by the internet feels so weak. And Boy George also sings some lines that are crucially important in my view and a clarion call to all decent people. If you're ever confused, he says, I stand with the Jews, making clear there is no shame with standing by a religious and ethnic minority under vicious attack. I don't feel brave, sings Boy George. I just need to behave like a human. Now, Boy George is right. He's just so right, singing just what the world needs to hear. It should not take bravery to behave like a human. And people trying to defend themselves against ongoing mindless slaughter deserve the support of every decent human being. Boy George, congratulations on being brave and singing the truth. Now, don't worry, he's already copping plenty of hate for his stand. He knows what decency costs, and it's a price that he's prepared to pay. What an example he sets. Someone who at times has been at the vanguard of musical fashion and clothing trends, showing us that you sometimes have to rail against the political fashion, against the horrible anti-Semitic zeitgeist, and stand up for your Jewish brothers and sisters. Stand up for humanity. And by the way, if you want to understand the sickening media bias on this issue, the disgusting attempts at moral equivalency, you only had to look at how The Guardian reported the Boy George story. They covered the release of the song and then, incredibly, delved into a little mathematical analysis. Boy George cites the attack by Hamas at the Nova Music Festival in October 2023, saying the civilians killed there were murdered for the crime of dancing, reports The Guardian. It then goes on to say that a total of 344 civilians and 34 security personnel were killed and 44 people were taken hostage, before adding that the overall Palestinian death toll since the war started is more than 73,000. What a heartless and brainless attempt at demonising Israel with some sort of death toll scoreboard summary, creating false equivalency and selectively censoring the relevant facts. The Guardian neglected to mention that more than 1,200 Israelis were killed that day, that 251 were taken hostage, some for years, and 80 of them were killed too. So they deliberately minimised the numbers to support their false comparison. They also failed to mention the Palestinian deaths came from the war deliberately started by Hamas that day and deliberately continued by Hamas for almost 3 years since. And they failed to mention that even according to the terrorists of Hamas, half of the Palestinians killed in the war were terrorists. Nor did The Guardian mention that all the innocent Israelis killed were killed and tortured and raped and taken hostage deliberately. Deliberate acts of terrorism directed against innocent civilians, whereas every tragic Palestinian civilian death has occurred as a tragic and unintentional consequence of warfare. in a war that Hamas has not only deliberately triggered, but in which it has hidden and attacked from behind and beneath its own Palestinian civilians. Instead of hiding Palestinian civilians underground to protect them, Hamas has kept terrorists and hostages underground and forced civilians to shift around above the ground, where they've been warned about attacks by Israel and given safe passage to get away from combat zones. All of this is the verified reality, but you read none of it in The Guardian or much of the media. I want to catch up now with the Shadow Foreign Affairs Minister, Ted O'Brien, who joins us from Brisbane. Good to talk to you again, Ted. I want to get to the economy in a moment, but I just want to start off with this ABC story that I mentioned at the top of the program, and the vile account there where they're referencing Gina Rinehart. She wants an apology. I can't understand why the government can't find within itself the moral fibre to demand an apology.
Great to be with you, Chris. And you use the word moral, and it's the right word to use because I think it is a clear display of moral weakness that the government is not insisting that the ABC steps up and apologises in this situation. It is absolutely appalling, the vulgarity used, the personal targeting used against Gina Rinehart. I'm absolutely disgusted by it. And by the way, Chris, I'm not one who beats up on the ABC. You know, I'm not one who's out there going, oh, the ABC is awful. Very rarely do I comment on our national broadcaster in a negative light, but I'm absolutely, on this case, I'm appalled. I mean, you don't treat any Australian like that. You don't especially treat an Australian woman like that. And then to suggest that I don't even want to call it a skit because it sort of makes it sound like it was all fun. That disgusting thing that was published by the ABC to apparently meet their standards, garbage. If that's the case, the standards need to change. The ABC should apologise. And the Albanese government should step in and show some leadership rather than a moral vacuum in this case. Well, do they just not like the person? I mean, what is it? Is it because she's rich? Is it because she's backing One Nation? I mean, I'm not One Nation, and I'm the first to say this is inappropriate. I'm appalled by it.
It's just extraordinary that the leadership of the ABC would not apologise, would not admit it's a mistake, that the government wouldn't say so publicly. It is pathetic. It lacks common decency. And if this was said about someone else, I'm certain there would be a different attitude. There seems to be a political agenda, some sort of ideological bias behind this. But I don't want to name other women because it's unfair, but we all know if there are other prominent women named in this way, that there would be hell to pay.
And there should be hell to pay no matter what. I mean, you know, if everyone just thinks of the women in their life, right? Whether it be your mum, your wife, your sister, your daughter, whatever. I mean, seriously? You have the ABC publishing something as vile as what they did against Gina Rinehart. Think about the impact that would have on you and your family if that happened to a loved one of yours. Now, we all make mistakes, right? So, you know, but when you make a mistake, you step up, you apologise for it. They have refused to do that. That's unacceptable.
Yeah, they got form on this. Of course, they once showed me up a dog and called me a dog effer, and there's the same. I mean, that's sort of water off a duck's back to me, but I thought it was important to take a stand because of the standards there and because they were trying to silence me and because of what it said about my family. And again, we had to take legal action thanks to my employers before the ABC would even apologise. It's pathetic. Common decency says, and Chris, just apologise at the very least and move on.
Yeah, exactly. And look, we're talking about the national broadcaster, right? So all of us have a stake in this. This reflects on us as a country. This is not who we are. Again, there are a lot of great people working for the ABC. It doesn't reflect well on them.
No, it's shocking.
You know, if management of the ABC, step up, apologise.
Yeah, but people might be surprised to know I have friends and people I respect who work at the ABC, and that's the trouble. This sort of stuff reflects badly on all of them. A couple of quick questions I need to get onto before I let you go. One is the Royal Commission into Construction Corruption in Victoria. The Victorian government, of course, with the new Premier, have been dragged kicking and screaming into calling that. That could cause a lot of trouble for the federal Labor government too, couldn't it?
Well, Chris, I hope it does, because the federal government are in on everything CFMEU. This is as much about the federal Labor team as it is about the Victorian Labor team. And if the new Victorian Labor leader wants to say that under his new regime, integrity is not optional, then it poses the question to Anthony Albanese whether or not he is lacking integrity by not stepping in and doing the same when it comes to the CFMEU. Labor is basically a wholly owned subsidiary of the union movement. Anthony Albanese has been clear with all of his policies. They are all being dirty dividends to their master. But now he has one of his own, the Labor leader in Victoria, calling out the CFMEU. I look forward to the same treatment from Anthony Albanese in calling a Royal Commission at the national level.
Yeah, well, there's federal money involved in some of these projects as well, so all federal taxpayers
100%.
ought to be interested in this. And just briefly, before we let you go, good news on the economy. Inflation easing a bit, which means we should not see another interest rate rise in the next month.
Oh, well, let's wait and see. I think the market will tell us what they're pricing in, what they're not. But again, the big problem here, Chris, is the federal government keeps spending money. The more money they pour into the economy, they're competing with households and businesses. That pushes prices up. Inflation remains above the 2.5% target of the Reserve Bank. They're going to increase interest rates. This all comes back to a government that cannot control money, Chris.
Ted, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. Ted O'Brien, the Shadow Foreign Affairs Minister, joining us live from Brisbane. I want to go to international affairs now, and Donald Trump has welcomed Volodymyr Zelensky and Benjamin Netanyahu to the White House as the US president seeks to find an end to two conflicts, of course. The Israel and Ukraine leaders were both in America to attend the funeral of longtime ally Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. Here's the latest from our Washington correspondent, Jonathan Kersley.
While in Washington, D.C., the two leaders held talks at the White House. First, the Ukraine president. Israel's prime minister was next. This after President Trump sent a pre-meeting message to Benjamin Netanyahu about the possibility of strikes on Iran's Pickaxe Mountain.
Well, I don't need Bibi to tell me that. Bibi's telling me that because he wants me to stay involved. I mean, I don't necessarily.
But this was all smiles. A senior source who accompanied Prime Minister Netanyahu telling News24 it was an extremely positive meeting. Benjamin Netanyahu declared it his best yet.
I just finished an excellent meeting with President Trump. When I say excellent, it's not just lip service. A conversation with full partnership, mutual support, understanding of the common goal to ensure that Iran does not have nuclear weapons.
Here we go. Let's bring back to the desk Tom Switzer, columnist with The Australian. Tom, pretty important meetings. Netanyahu and Zelensky have both, of course, been to the White House before, but it was a good time to actually be catching up with them.
Well, indeed, and the question is what does President Trump do? Does he up the ante against the Iranians, as no doubt Prime Minister Netanyahu hopes he will do? And will he give the Patriot missile interceptors to the Ukrainians who want to guard against the Russian drones and missile attacks?
Well, there was a missile attack from Iran at US interests in the Gulf, and they were taken out by American defensive missiles. So this technology works so well, it's essentially kept Israel going for the past decade. So why wouldn't you allow the Ukrainians access to that technology?
Well, if you read the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, there have been several stories in the course of the last few weeks highlighting that there are actually interceptor and munitions shortages for the Americans. And indeed, the Wall Street Journal editorial page just this week actually published a scathing editorial.
Well, it suggests this has been deliberately leaked by Trump.
Well, if not by Trump, certainly in someone in the White House, but yeah, maybe Trump, as justification for not upping the ante.
Yeah, we will see. We will see. I want to go to what's happening in Iran in the meantime. And this morning, tragically, more dissidents, 3 young dissidents who the government had targeted and imprisoned, were executed as dawn broke.
Iranian authorities publicly executed 2 young protesters in the same square where demonstrations had erupted during this January's uprising. Hours earlier, sources told Iran International that the families of 3 protesters, Amir Hossein Safari and cousins Ali Reza and Abolfaz Sepahi, had been summoned to prison for final visits. They also said an iron scaffold had been erected in the city's Ali Khani Square and security forces were deployed across the area. Video sent to Iran International showed a large deployment of security forces around the square as the executions took place. Residents gathered nearby and shouted slogans against the government, while separate footage showed security forces attacking people protesting the executions.
Yeah, a rare insight into what's happening in Iran at the moment. I want to raise this for a number of reasons. One is just the sheer barbarity of this regime executing dissidents in this way at dawn, during the dawn call to prayer, showing what an Islamist extremist regime it is. But also, we're not getting much information out of Iran. And this showed that with those security deployments and the like, and the reports of crowds protesting against these executions, it shows us that there is still opposition to the regime and that the regime is still worried about that internal opposition.
Look, there's no question that this regime, since the Iranian Revolution, the Islamic Revolution of 1979, is a brutal Shia theocracy. The mullahs broke no dissent for people who challenge the regime, and they will play hardball against these poor, innocent people. That's not in dispute. The sad reality is that this regime is more likely to be hardline because they feel that their back's against the wall. They think, from the regime's perspective, they're facing an existential threat from the United States.
Well, they
are.
Great
links to stifle any dissent.
But there's no doubt about any of those things you've said, but my point is we got a bit of an insight from some of the reporting of this, that there are still protests against the regime in Iran and that the regime is deploying internal security to quell it. That, I think, is, in some ways encouraging.
Look, I think if regime change is going to take place, the Americans need to countenance the idea of committing ground troops. Can you name an example of where regime change worked from air power alone, with the exception of Germany and Japan?
Yeah, well, they're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. But it gives us an insight. You don't think that the Iranian regime is at all unstable at the moment?
I think it's certainly reeling from the impact of the naval blockade, but they will play hardball, as I've said to you on this program. They will eat grass if they have to wait out the Americans. And they're betting that Donald Trump will blink first. And these stories that the White House is allegedly giving to the Wall Street Journal, that they are suffering from munitions losses, only helps Tehran's game plan.
Yeah, they're betting. They play the social media game, the political game, and it's we'll see how. We'll get the measure of Trump, I suppose, in the coming months. Thanks for joining us,
Thanks,
Tom.
Chris.
Tom Switzer there. You can read his stuff in The Australian. Got to get to a break. On the other side, more on Boy George, the karma chameleon, showing the world how to stand up for Jews, how to stand up for facts, and how to stand up for humanity. I'll cross to Esther Kraku. I'll cross to Esther Kraku in London in just a moment. But first, as we mentioned on Monday, the man who carried out that Islamist terror attack in Berlin over the weekend was arrested and charged previously on terror-related charges, then freed because he promised to leave his extremist days behind. But despite all that, have a look at how Berlin's queer commissioner has sought to shift the conversation and the focus onto the far right.
The far right here in Germany is, of course, waiting for an attack like this one to use it in order to highlight that the foreigners are the problem. But by doing so, they completely forget and avoid to look at how much queerphobia there is in this country in all various levels of structures, in schools, at the workplace, in churches, on the streets, in sports, and in so many other places. Yes, they might not come out onto the streets with a van and kill us in a big, huge group like possibly this attack could have done.
Unbelievable. Let's bring in writer and broadcaster Esther Kraku. Essie, I've got to get you to walk me through the logic of this bloke here. He's saying that, how could you possibly seize upon Islamist extremism to talk about Islamist extremism? Rather, because an Islamist extremist kills someone, then the shame is on everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, you really can't make sense of it because this is the kind of the grips that these people are in, the mental grip to try and make it so. I mean, there was a singer at the memorial held for the woman who died during this attack, who was not mentioned at all at any point in this memorial, if you believe it or not.
Good
and
Lord.
She talked about her disappointment that the person who carried this attack wasn't a white Christian man. So they're so desperate for a reality that is not so to be, so that it fits their narrative, which is the most pathetic and horrifying and saddening thing. But the reality is they can't. There's not enough sort of demand for what there's not enough supply for what they're demanding, which is for the narrative to have shifted and for the person who committed this attack to not be of a radical Islamist background. But unfortunately, that is the case, and I think the fact that they're more concerned with the far right, which had nothing to do with this attack, than the fact that, for example, in Germany, the AfD is polling quite highly with gay men because, surprise, surprise, people don't want to live next to homophobes from cultures that are not friendly to their sexual orientation. The fact that they're less concerned with that than the fact that there are people that are ramming their cars into people just for their sexual orientation is horrifying.
Yeah, it's disgusting. And the other contradiction here, of course, and it's a hypocrisy we see around the world, at this gay pride march, there was a level of support for the Palestinian cause and a level of anti-Israeli hatred. Have a listen to this bloke at that rally where someone was killed.
Well, Israel is the aggressor in the entire Middle Eastern region right now, bombing everyone while each and every day you have these ceasefires being discussed, which are at the same time being just completely ignored by Israel.
So he says Israel is the aggressor, and of course, only a matter of minutes later, an Islamist extremist demonstrates exactly how the reality is, and that is that it's the Islamist extremists who are the aggressors, not just when it comes to the Middle East, but with these issues right throughout Europe and the rest of the world.
Yes, and the irony is that he would probably be safer in the country that he's criticizing Israel than certainly Gaza or other parts of Palestine. And it's basically like, chickens for KFC. This weird red-green alliance of sort of Islamist-friendly individuals and people on the far left, which is probably the most unholy marriage, if you could ever imagine, is fracturing because it's a marriage of convenience. It's not rooted in any coherent political thought. And unfortunately, you're seeing this to the extent that people are wishing that the people who are actually carrying out these terrorist attacks are of a different demographic background because it fits their narrative. How sick do you have to be to want that to be the case?
Yeah, it's just unbelievable. The thing is, though, what gives me hope is someone is standing out above the parapet at the moment, and that is the singer and television star Boy George, who's always been strong in what he's had to say against anti-Semitism, but he's now put that to song. I showed some of it earlier. Here's another look. Esther, there's so much truth in this song. He says the genocide slur is a lie. He says this is a war. It's ugly, but it's a war of self-defence for people who are being attacked. What's the reaction been so far in the UK to this song?
I think the reaction has been predictable, and you probably won't hear this song on the top 40 hits anytime soon. I think what I did find that's the most striking about this is Boy George is a Londoner of Irish Catholic descent. So you can't even make the argument that this is just a Jewish person showing solidarity with the Jewish community. And I think that's really what's been missing from our mainstream media. And it kind of shows how monolithic it's become. I mean, I wrote a piece saying I don't stand with, the Jewish community as a member of the Black community or whatever. I stand as a human being who's concerned for other human beings. And I think the fact that you had the BBC showing a performance at Glastonbury where death to the IDF was being chanted, and that was treated as, oh, naughty, naughty, but really they've been pushed to do it. But something like this is seen as countercultural. Just shows that our media hasn't really done a good job in showing both sides of the argument. Of course, it's uncomfortable, but that's what the media is there for. It's supposed to reflect various views in society and show both sides of every story so people are well informed. It's not supposed to tell people what to think or how to think. It's just supposed to show people the reality and the facts. But our media class has been so taken over by people of one political ideology or leaning that this is seen as controversial. And the fact that we're not even surprised that it's controversial is what's even sadder. Because in any other industry, this would have basically been a death knell. But he, I suppose, has thrown caution to the wind. His last hit was in 2010, and he thought, "What do I have to lose? If people can freely show solidarity with one side and not have it destroy their career, then I might as well take this chance."
Yeah, well, good on him, because he's doing the right thing, and we need more people who are non-Jewish to stand up, because this is not an issue for the Jewish community alone. This is an issue for all civilizations, and everybody's got to stand up for humanity, as you say, Esther. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Esther Kraku there in the UK. We will take a break. On the other side of that, I want to get into the electricity debate again and talk about the increasing prices. They're still escalating right across the country. I'll catch up with the Shadow Energy Minister, Dan Tehan. I mentioned at the top of the program there was just a smidgen of decent economic news today, with inflation just easing back a tad, which might take the pressure off future interest rate rises. Here's the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers.
We know that people are still under pressure. We know that inflation is still higher than we would like it to be. We know that the war in the Middle East and the uncertain developments, even in the last couple of weeks, risks that outlook as well. But in the circumstances that we find ourselves in, these numbers today are encouraging. They have come in lower than what was anticipated.
Let's go to Toowoomba and catch up with Shadow Energy Minister Dan Tehan. Thanks for joining us, Dan. Look, there's no doubt inflation just edged back and flatlined when it came to the underlying inflation. But what stood out for me is the electricity prices are still in there, going up over 20% across the year, and this is where so many people feel the pinch.
Absolutely, Chris, you're spot on, and yet all we hear from Chris Bowen is that they're going down, and it just doesn't add up, because what we see today, again in the inflation figures quite clearly, is that they continue to go up, as you've said, 20%. It means that the idea of that $275 reduction in your power bill is finished. It's gone. It's kabut. It's not going to happen. And sadly, there is nothing that this government is doing that I think is going to see that number come down over the coming 12 months.
Now, this is more than just a story to an issue of personal pain. We know those power increases really crush household budgets and small business people, but it's also a broader economic point, because this must be feeding to into the inflation problem right across the country, because electricity is such a big input for so many industries, and when it comes to refrigeration and transport and all the rest of it, if they could get on top of the energy issue, it would be so good for the economy overall.
Once again, absolutely spot on. You know, there's the over 240,000 Australians, sadly, who are dealing with energy hardship in this country. But there's also businesses who are being forced to shut down, close, or lay workers off because of higher electricity prices. And then you've got those households who are facing a double whammy. Not only are they facing higher electricity bills and higher gas bills, but also they're worried that if this electricity inflation continues, they're going to be facing higher interest rates. And all this adds up, sadly, to one thing: people's standard of living continues to decline in this country at a rate higher than pretty much any other industrialised country in the world. And you can point the finger straight at what's happening to electricity prices as one of the primary results of that.
Now, Chris Bowen is still out there spruiking his home battery scheme every day. It's gone double budget. It's blown its budget by double. Of course, only people with spare cash, you've got to be relatively well off to be able to afford these batteries, but then more taxpayers' money comes in and helps subsidise them for you. So we're all paying, whether we're poor or wealthy, we're all paying for other people to get their batteries. And in the meantime, the green dream is becoming so embarrassing that it's pointed out today that the Australian Hydrogen Council has changed its name. It's now got hydrogen out of the name because it's so embarrassed about how the whole green hydrogen scam has fallen over at the cost, I might add, of tens of millions of dollars of taxpayers' money.
And you'll remember Chris Bowen spruiking that we were going to become a green energy superpower based on hydrogen. And we don't hear so much about that anymore, as that seems to have disappeared out of his lexicon. And Chris, you will have noticed he's starting to replace it with sovereign renewables. Well, I mean, it's beyond a joke, seriously, because there is nothing sovereign about the renewables. And, you know, his $2 billion to $8 billion home battery scheme, we're convinced, and they won't release the data to us, but we're convinced that at least over 90% of those batteries have been imported from overseas, and the majority of them most likely from China.
Yeah, great use of taxpayers' money. Now, I just want to bring to your attention the Sky News Pulse survey results when it comes to nuclear energy, and they show us that 42% of Australians say we should get rid of the nuclear ban, and only 37% against. 20% don't know. So you're in the hunt when it comes to this nuclear energy debate. Are we expecting to hear more detail from the coalition on its nuclear energy plans soon?
Absolutely. So the ban goes. We're 100% crystal clear about that. Just tell your viewers loud and clear, the ban goes. And we'll have more to say with what our nuclear plan is over the coming months. And I can tell you that work is being done. It's nearly finalised. We want to be able to put out the next stage very soon. But we cannot understand, A, why we aren't exporting more uranium, and two, why we aren't technology neutral in this country, given that we've got uranium here. Why wouldn't we offer the chance for us to be able to use it here in a responsible and safe?
We should use it, we should process it, we should store the waste, we should be part of the whole cycle and profiting magnificently from it. But we'll come back to that issue another time. Dan, thanks for joining us. Dan Tehan there, the Shadow Energy Minister. We've got to get to a break. We've got to the break. We've got James and Justin wrangling after that. One of the questions is, why is the divorce rate falling? Time for the Wednesday Wrangle, and on the desk here with me is News24 contributor and digital wizard James Bolt. Good to see you again, James.
Be here. And
in Melbourne, sporting his One Nation orange kerchief, is columnist, broadcaster Justin Smith. Good to see you, mate.
Mr. Kenny, hello, James.
Tell us how things looking in Melbourne. Is it morning in Victoria now with Ben Carroll in charge?
Oh, wow. Wasn't that a crazy, incredible day yesterday? I got to say, as a person who observes these things and commentates on these things, there's nothing like seeing a little bit of chaos play out to really stiffen the sinews and summon up the blood. Ben Carroll seems to be doing, though, probably the only thing that could help him get even close to winning in November, which is completely distancing himself from everybody else. I think in that press conference, if he had stood up and said, look, Dan Andrews did a terrific job, Jacinta Allen did a terrific job, I think he would be absolutely toast. But clearly he's gone in with a plan. Either he's advising himself or he's got some good advisors around him. So the only thing he can do is to say, look, they were rubbish and I'm going to be terrific. I'm paraphrasing, of course.
Of course. Well, but James, he said he's not Jack the Ripper, he's not Attila the Hun, he's not Jacinta Allen, he's not... I mean, he was deputy to Jacinta Allen.
Yeah.
It's so implausible, it's so unauthentic.
Yeah, he can do this whole, like, I'm not like any of them else. But, if you zoom slightly to the left on any of Jacinta Allen's important press conferences, you see Ben Carroll. And I also love, he's like, I'm not Dan Andrews, I am not Dan Andrews. And what has Dan Andrews done except put out a bringing endorsement of how good Ben Carroll's going to be for the state? And I'm sure Ben would have seen that email and just gone, please, Dan, you are not helping.
Well, it gets even better than that.
Don't help.
It gets even better than that because he's so embarrassed of his former colleagues and the people he worked so hard to support that he won't even say a premier of more than a decade standing deserves a statue. Have a look.
I have nothing to say on that, and that is not a priority of mine.
Do you want to see the statue then?
It's not a priority of mine.
He doesn't want to re-endorse Dan Andrews with a statue. Justin, what do you reckon? He looked like a statue when he was trying not to answer that.
I would just say to the people of Victoria, get used to it, because that's what it's going to be. I'm telling you, there was a picture floating around today of him with his notes in front of him yesterday. Not that would be a big shock. I've got notes in front of me here. But on those notes, it's going to be clear that he will do this constantly.
Yep.
Anything to do with the other government, he's going to get himself as far away or not comment at all and just rush for the finishing line. It's actually really, politically, I'm not sure if it's going to be great for the state, politically it's a very smart tactic.
Well, but it's also been done. It's been tried so many times before. I wrote about it back in the 1990s as the Pol Pot strategy. That is, there's the year zero. Yesterday was the year zero. There was no history, apparently. I want to go back to yesterday, though, James, and show you my favourite quote from Ben Carroll yesterday. Have a look.
We are saying enough is enough. In my government, integrity will not be optional.
So it's been optional, apparently, the past dozen years.
I think so. And it's hard for him to sell that when, a couple of weeks ago, he's out at a press conference going, I would never roll Jacinta Allen and look my daughter in the eyes, or whatever combination that was. Because, if you're going to sell yourself on integrity, you need to have that perfect record. And again, we say it.
Oh, this is not new, though.
It is.
This is not new, James. All politicians have been doing this since the dawn of time.
But you yourself
they have been saying, I support my leader, and then they roll the leader.
But you yourself just said, this could be the thing that Victorian Labor used to get back in power. It's politically smart. But hopefully the Victorian people are smarter than this old political strategy. Because, Ben Carroll, my government is one of integrity. He's been serving in non-integrity government.
Integrity starts today, and I've never heard of Dan Andrews or Jacinta Allen. It's playing voters for fools. It's treating Victorians like they're idiots. But anyway, we'll keep an eye on it. It'll be a lot of fun. I want to get your thoughts on something totally different today, because there was a story that caught my eye in The Australian. The good news is that the Australian divorce rate is dropping. But, Justin, there was a suggestion that this was happening because times are tough and people can't afford to sort of split up their assets or whatever. I would have thought it's more straightforward than that, because the marriage rate dropped off dramatically during COVID. And if you have fewer marriages, you'll have fewer divorces, right?
Yeah, look, and times have changed a bit. I mean, people don't necessarily get married. They might just either live together or just move around from person to person, but they don't get married like they used to. Not really. Times have changed. So look at this. The business about it being it's expensive to get married. Here's a shock for you. It's expensive to get married. It's expensive to live together. It's expensive to split up.
I can confirm all of those. But James, you're relatively newly married, but it's encouraging that there are fewer divorces.
Yeah, I think it's partly because couples live together before they get married, so you kind of know, you've got a test case of whether or not we're compatible. But to be honest, I actually do think, the lower divorce rates is part of because of the cost of living, as, Justin said there. It is expensive. You've got to think about houses. You've got to think about where you're going to live next. You've got to think about cars, etc. All these things. I mean, people are struggling to pay their regular day-to-day energy bills. Imagine all those extra expenses you'd have to think about. People are just sticking it out.
Great to talk to you both.
Stay
I
together,
appreciate
James.
it.
Stay together.
Fine, we're going
the
really
old
well.
Brian
We haven't
Ferry
thought
song,
about it.
let's stick together. James Bolton, Justin Smith, thanks so much for joining me. A little time just to squeeze in some of your feedback from what we had to say last night about Zoran Mamdani and those state-run grocery stores in New York City. One viewer says, I'm Russian and I still can't believe how dumb those New Yorkers are. And when the government subsidises it, it really means taxpayers pay for it. Look for higher taxes and more government control, which slowly strangles a free society. Nothing is free. And ask the Russians how their government-run supermarkets went during communism. Well, actually, we showed you last night bread lines. Thanks for watching. I'll be back tomorrow night. Here's Peter Credlin.